Hey everybody, it's time for The Plot Hole with your hosts, Johnny O and Jeremy Flair.
Are you gay?
Coming at you live.
We'll do it live! Fuck it!
Every Friday night at 8.
Every Friday night at 8.
On rockmetaltalk.com.
I went with jockeys here.
Something stinks like stale French fries.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
I killed your cat, you druggy bitch.
Do it.
I'm funny how? I mean funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you, I make you laugh, I'm here to fucking amuse you. How the fuck am I funny? What the fuck is so funny about me? Tell me what's
right.
funny.
What's so funny about me? Hello, everybody. It's time for The Plot Hole. I'm Johnny O, and you're on www.rockmetaltalk.com, part of the Jay Stone Show Network. It's Friday night, 8 o'clock, which means it's time for The Plot Hole. A couple of quick announcements. If you wish to become a Plot Hole Patreon, go to www.patreon.com/theplothole1. That's the Plot Hole 1, the number 1, not O-N-E. You, for as little as $1 a month, you too can become a producer of the show. You can also check us out on YouTube. Got a great channel going. At least I think it's great, but you know, what does it matter? Check us out on the YouTubes, Facebooks, all that stuff. If you need links, head on over to the Discord, and we'll get you in on that Discord chat room. Let's see who we have in the background. Let's see if we've got the old Grover, J.L. Warren, and Mr. Eddy. Let's see what we got going on. How much want to bet they're going to be talking? Here they go. Oh, wow. They weren't talking this time. Amazing. Keith, say hello, everybody.
We're totally professional here.
All right, Grover, give us your hellos and howdy-doos.
Hey, how y'all doing, beautiful people?
And that sexy voice you heard back there was the wonderful J.L. Warren. He is the awesomely bearded, increasingly handsome J.L. Warren from the Weekend Horror Podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having me back on.
All right, anytime.
Increasingly handsome.
That's right. I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool to say.
I like it.
All right, and first time on the show, we've got our special guest, Eddy. Eddy, say hello to everybody.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Eddy.
All right. So some of you may be wondering what we're doing today, and I figured we're having some pretty good traction with our debate/discussion shows. And I wanted to make today's show more of a discussion. We're going to be talking about morality and whether or not morality is something that is God-given or not. Be sure to post your questions for our guests in the chat, in the Discord chat. You can also go to theplothole.com and donate that way with questions. I'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, let's kick this off. So I want to do, Eddy, seeing as how you're the guest here, I want to give you just a few minutes to kind of introduce yourself and your position on morality, and then we'll switch over to JL, and then we'll just kind of hop into the discussion.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I am a business analyst by profession. I have a podcast on personality development. And on morality, if I say, I've been taking lots of lectures in my spiritual community related to morality. And also I'm too much into religion and I take those lectures as well. So that's how it goes.
All right. So would your position be that morality is something that comes from a deity, or how does that work?
Morality, what I feel is should be coming from the religion more oversight, because in a practical world we see that if it becomes too much of an independent thing, then you most of the times expect the same from others as well. Like if I'm doing something good to my friend, I expect the same from him, and when he doesn't do that, it becomes a problem for me. I feel like, okay, why I should be nice to everyone when people aren't nice to me? But when it comes from the right source, when it comes from the religion, you always know that whatever happens for good. You have that mentality in mind that whatever happens for good. God is not going to forbid me. He's always with me, and that's how it goes. Yeah, that's what I.
All right, JL. So if you want to take a few minutes and kind of give your positions, and then we'll go from there.
Excellent. So, yes, I'm JL, co-host of the Weekend Horror Podcast, and I occasionally discuss or debate topics on the internet. Thank you. I want to give a thank you to the Plot Hole and to Eddy for allowing me to engage with this discussion. I've been really excited to dive into this particular topic for a while now. So, on this topic here, that of morality, being a particular system of values and principles of conduct that are held by a society, my position is that the most logically consistent conclusion that can be made in accordance with the demonstrable evidence is that morality, as an abstract idea, is wholly subjective. Its parameters determined by the societal trends of the time. The concept of objective morality, that those same values and principles are derived or contingent upon an exterior source, is logically unsound, because any conclusion that is drawn from an undemonstrable or unfalsifiable claim is not rational or reasonable.
All right. So, Eddy, what do you have to say about that? What do you have to say about what's going on there with the position that JL's taking, that it doesn't require a deity for morals, do not require something external?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite obvious many people feel that way, but yeah, I mean, somewhere or the other way, morals have come. The original source of moral is from the religion itself, because way down if we go, then our parents or grandparents or great grandparents must have followed some religion, so that they can pass those manners, they can pass those morality to us, to their generation as well. And that's how it has come. I think Bible, and each and every scriptures, the God written scriptures, if we see the religious scriptures, we see everything has a perfect definition of morality. And that's how people came to know about the morality, because previously, if you see, people were killing each other for the purpose of having food. But now the things have changed, like long back I'm talking about, but now each and everything has changed because of the scriptures. No matter what, it can be, I must say that it can be written by a human and then pretended that it is written by God. But at the same time, these scriptures actually help us to build a better life and build a better morale in our life as well.
All right. JL?
Well, actually, I partially kind of agree with where Eddy with where you're starting. So it's important to remember. I think you're actually on the right track. If you start from here, from where we are today, in the moral systems that we have today, and then those moral systems were passed on to us by our parents. But if we have to keep going back, and the thing is, I don't think you've gone back far enough, because religion, any religious system, whether it be polytheistic or monotheistic or anything of this nature, these are all actually, in the spans of human existence, these are all actually fairly new concepts. So they don't go back. They only go back a few thousand years. But human societies as a whole have been around much longer than that. So going back to polytheistic, going back into interpretive, or basically the basic interpretations of the world around us. But humanity, like humans, have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And while we have, as a species, may have come up with the imaginative explanations as to why things happen in the world, religion, organized religion as we know it today, did not exist. And yet our species is still here. As we were evolving throughout time, we had eight or nine other human cousins that were along the ride with us. And we have outlasted all of them, and we did it without religion. And that morality that objective morality that you're speaking of is actually just us as a societal species, because for the well-being of the species, just as a goal for survival, we create boundaries amidst each other. So if the human species just ran around raping and killing and stealing just at a whim, because they had no what you define as morality, this species would not be here. And so what you're confusing, what you're calling objective morality, is actually you're confusing survival imperative for objective morality. So it wasn't morality as an abstract idea. It was a system of behaviors that we adopted to ensure the survival and well-being of our species. And that over time, as we have learned to rationalize and reason, as our brains evolved and became, and our frontal lobes became more capable of abstract thought, we began to apply this abstract idea of morality to systems of values. But you can tell, but we know it's subjective, and the greatest evidence is throughout human history, because societies like the Greeks I would go back and forth, from the Akkadians to the Egyptians, from the Greeks to the Roman Empire, to feudal Japan, to today. All of them have had different moral systems that put different things ahead of other things. That they viewed one thing as moral, as like here in Western society, we view suicide as an inherently immoral act. Okay, but in Japan, suicide is viewed as a very moral act in order to regain one's honor, because it's a different moral structure that they have. Because it changes from society to society, that is the first and foremost demonstrable evidence that we can cite when describing the subjectivity of morality itself.
Question for the board, if I may.
Go ahead.
For the guests. So, do you think a large part of what we generally across the board understand as morality, throughout human history, is it defined in the way of finding a sense of self-awareness, and creating what's called empathy, and maybe kind of expanding upon that to kind of gain a sense of self-survival as your tribe?
Yes, I would agree that tribalism does play into it, and that's why we have different moral standards for different societal groups. We even have different societal groups today that have, for lack of a better term, for objectively different moral standards. That
All right, hang on
their
a second.
subjective morality is wildly different from others.
Okay, so I want to get Eddie back in here, and I want to hear his thoughts on that. So, Eddie, how would you rectify the differences in morality amongst different societies if they're all coming from one place?
Look, I'll say that yes, there are differences in the morality or the moral behavior, but there are certain things which is still the same. Okay, and there are certain misinterpretation which has been done. Like previously there was a rule of Akam, and now it is completely a different kind of morality which they prefer now. So what happens over here is that if I say about general morals which is written in each and every scripture, whether it is Japan, America, or India, these are like you shouldn't do drugs, you shouldn't drink alcohol, you shouldn't smoke, you shouldn't lie to anyone. These are some common behaviors which are being explained. And obviously what happens is, yes, the scriptures are basically they are manipulated by the people who are at the bigger stage. If it's like a college thing. Okay, if you need the right education, you need to go to the right college, right? And it is a similar way that if you want to gain good knowledge about the morality, it is better that you go to a college of religion rather than feeling independent, and at the end you might not know what exactly is a good ethics to follow, or what exactly is the bad ethics to follow.
Well, Eddie, I gotta jump in there, because I think you made a false equivalency there. You equated getting a specialized education at a school that teaches a specialized education with deriving a moral system, subjective moral system, from a particular set of teachings. You keep citing the scriptures, and I'm assuming you're meaning the Bible. I'm assuming you're coming from the Christian standpoint, but we can see that from the survival of different societies, that something amidst their moral framework does work. It works towards their survival. So their subjective version of morality is working for them. We may not agree with it from a societal standpoint, but it does work for them because they haven't obliterated themselves in absolute chaos or anarchy. So how are you determining that your particular moral system is the correct one when we cannot determine with any 100 we can't determine with any real certainty that any one of them is absolutely correct or absolutely incorrect, because they all seem to work and they all come from different sources?
Look, that's a good question. Okay, and look, what happens is what I want to say over here. I'm not trying to imply that some religion are the best ones. Okay, but what I'm trying to imply is that some of the common behavior works for everyone. In every religion or in every society you go, there are some basic morals which is specified or which is being taught in every kind of religion, and those religion has helped a lot of people to get out of those things, the things which they were doing, like some were doing drugs, and it is because of the religion they have come out and in a far more better way rather than being independent on it. Because what happens is, as an independent guy, we feel that okay, fine, doing drugs, I'm not harming anyone, but doing drugs is not a bad thing. Most of the people would think that because they are not doing harm to any other people. But at the other hand, okay, religion are the one to explain them that this shouldn't be done, right? So I'm not implying over here that any one religion is the better one, but what I'm telling is, rather than being independent or rather than learning from yourself, you better go to one college and you better go to one religion and learn certain things which are quite important for building a better life.
Let me ask you a question. Hang on a second, Joe. So you mentioned, and I kind of latched onto this because I've done a little bit of looking into AA groups for different reasons. But you mentioned that spirituality, to get that moral compass in recovery groups, but there are recovery groups that are non-spiritual, that are more that leave faith secular, completely. Yeah, they're completely secular and leave faith out of it, that have as much, if not more, rates of success. So how would we go about rectifying that contradiction to faith-based AA, for instance?
Okay. Look, what happens is, in every community you go, okay, there is one thing which you will be finding, that people support each other, right?
Okay, we can agree to that.
Whatever yeah. So what happens that even though, okay, the recovery is done with the fellow humans, there is a kind of hope which a people will give to a guy who is recovering from that, right?
Yeah, well, there's an issue there, is that what you're asserting is that the gains that can be gotten from these religious systems cannot be gained, or they can be better gained than secular systems. And what the evidence shows is that the religious systems are not necessary in order to achieve a kind of basic moral standard, in which the moral standard is we are in this together and we share space with each other, and my rights end at the end of my hand, and we can learn these things in a secular system where it's not required to be it. So we see success on both sides, and it can be argued that the evidence shows that there's more success on the secular side, because it eliminates a governing system that basically, instead of giving positive feedback, it gives negative feedback in that of guilt. And that if you fail at this, you should feel bad that you have failed in this. Whereas the secular system says, if you fail at this, that is okay. You rely on your fellow people, or your fellow people who are going through this. You rely on them, and you draw your hope and your strength from the people around you who are going through the similar experience, because faith is such a difficult thing to hold on to in the darkest of times. So secular systems teach you to rely on the people around you and the experiences of the people around you, and that is why they inherently have more success and more reported success than the secular systems. So I still fail to see why.
You mean the non-secular?
non-secular systems. I still fail to see how we derive morality, or we can say morality, or the abstract idea of morality is derived from an objective source. The evidence shows that it's subjectively derived from the society in which we live, from the rules that are passed down and given to the society, and from that we derive our moral standard.
Kind not agree with that because look, I don't know whether is there really any evidence or not about it, but look, what happens is I have seen especially in my country that uh, religion helps most of the people to get out certain things, okay? And for those country, let's say those who doesn't have recovery groups, what about them? Like there are countries, okay, and especially I'll say in my country itself, in India, there are no recovery groups, okay. The only religion which we follow, and in that religion we are told that you need to worship the worshipper, okay. So they don't have to beg to God about certain things. They don't have to do any other thing, but they need to worship the worshipper. So what we people do is we try and help each other out in the entire community, and that has helped us out a lot because being a leader, it sometimes you help out certain people get out of that trauma, to get out that depression, because for the country who doesn't have the recovery groups or who doesn't follow that kind of method, for those people religion will be a very important part of their society.
It is,
And I haven't been able to see like I have been to US one time in New York for my business kind of thing, and I have seen over there. I have been to one group, and yeah, people do support each other, but too much of supporting also it might not be good. Sometimes you need to be a strict people as well. That okay, if you are failing into this, for once, for twice, it's fine. But if you're failing for the third time, that means there is something wrong, and a person needs to be strict on that. It's similar that if a child in a class is misbehaving, once you will just support him, and you'll just give him a warning. For twice, you will give him a warning, but thrice, if the same thing is done, you need to take some action, right?
well, I agree. I agree that you can lay down boundaries, but when you're talking about the subjective experiences of individuals, and none of us could really be logically or could be intellectually honest when we comment upon another person's personal experience, because we are not in their shoes. We don't know how they perceive things, particularly especially at an emotional level. So we can only approach it from an even and secular standpoint. So we set boundaries and we set rules, and then we do our best to mitigate the risk in that, and then we assist and provide systems of support. But you still haven't really explained how deriving a moral system from a particular religion, in your eyes, in the eyes of Christianity, despite the fact that long before Christianity ever came to India, obviously, Hinduism and Buddhism was very, very powerful in that realm, in that area of the world. And I have great respect for the Buddhist philosophy, but that area of your country, I think the word is I think you're kind of biased towards that, because the history of your country has long been, for pretty much recorded history, has been rooted in religious belief and in religious dogmatic systems, and it has not been secular. But we have demonstrable evidence of secular societies, of secular countries in this world today that have better standards of living, they have better health care, they have virtually no crime, that these things exist, and that they are not required, that a religious system is not required to reach a moral standard, and that those morals may be different from ours, but it still doesn't answer the question. I think it goes to support my argument that morality is a subjective thing, that humans, while we possess the most complex moral system of all social species on Earth, we are not the only ones capable of human comparable morality. there are animals on this planet that are capable of cetaceans are capable of this. Many of the great apes have their own moral systems that keep their species alive and keep things in check. And we cannot say that, and they don't even reason as powerfully as us. So this is a deeply rooted ability within our frontal lobes that, and it has changed from society to society. I mean, today we don't practice eugenics like the Spartans did in order to create the greatest fighting force the world has ever known. We don't engage in suicide like they did in feudal Japan when we have feel that we have lost our honor and we have dishonored our family name. But these were moral systems then that applied to their belief structures or their accepted belief structures. Whereas, but we've seen throughout that despite the fact that they can be subjective, there is a behavioral standard, and that we have applied the abstract idea of morality to the behavioral standard. So so the morality, the subjective morality that you're referring to, is simply a product of our higher reasoning capability. And we've simply taken the label of morality and placed it onto the behavioral standards that we accept and will permit for the betterment of our society and our people.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. So, taking a section of your statement, I just want to target one small section of it, not the entire thing. So, do you feel that the lessening of let's just call it pressure creates perhaps a better outcome, better behavior? As far as call it morality, call it survival of human beings, call it what you will, but not that overwhelming pressure that let's say that it's either misused or not implied correctly might create a better outcome.
Are you talking about removing the pressure of having a religious system on top of recovery systems?
Yes, I mean, kind of understanding that sometimes if you apply pressure on someone and it's something they might not fully understand, you're actually doing more damage than good.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree with that. I believe that the unfalsifiable and unquantifiable nature of a religious moral system or religious restrictions placed upon recovery systems when people are at their most vulnerable, inherently the damage is inherent to that, because in a place of recovery, people are at their weakest. They are at their
and recovery could mean anyone from actually
anything,
recovery,
exactly.
or children, or
it could
war
be
veterans.
it could be substance abuse. It could be PTSD. It could be trauma. Anything. Anybody in a recovery system needs support systems. We know this. This is a fact. And when you put such a nebulous restriction with moral guidelines, or these moral guidelines, not behavioral guidelines, but moral guidelines that dictate behavior within a recovery system, that person in their recovery may instinctually want to do this. Their body and their mind knows how to heal. The problem is sometimes it needs time and it needs support to do so, to make mistakes. And if it, just like healing a broken bone, you can't force the bone into healing, but you can stabilize the bone so that the bone heals naturally. That is what humans need. When you put the strict nature of a religious system on top of a vulnerable person in recovery, you will do more. We have seen it. You will do more damage because you are adjusting how they're going to heal. And they need to be able to heal on their own terms, in their own time, with the support structures necessary in order to get to the finish line. And religion just muddies the water.
Mm-hmm. All right, Eddie, go ahead and respond.
I'll just step in over here. GL, I still don't agree with you. Like, have you ever seen that for a recovery guy, are there any moral standards being implied on that during the recovery process? Because I really don't feel so, because I have been there, in for the people who wants to recover, okay, in a religion, like I follow Hinduism completely, and I have been in the recovery group for the people who wants to get recovered, and we do support them. It's but we support in a way that it is kind of important that they need to learn from their mistakes rather than everything should be like spoon feeding. Because look, I'll tell you this one thing, okay, no matter whatsoever support you give to an addict, let's say, I'm not talking about trauma, I'm not talking about depression, those people actually need a lot of support. But let's say for those people who are an addict, who are doing drugs or maybe any other thing, and for them providing support is a good thing. But let's say, what if they break the rule twice or thrice times? What about that? At that point of time, still we need to support them, or we need to set certain boundaries.
But we can do that without a religious standard, and I have been a part of and have seen and have taken part of and seen many recovery structures with veterans, with victims of trauma, with victims of abuse, with people in recovery, both addicts, alcoholics. Alcoholism and addiction runs very heavily in my family. I have multiple family members who are currently in treatment, and I have seen firsthand, just from that perspective, I've seen firsthand from both my background in psychology and my background and just my family itself, and from the evidence we have. All of this evidence is available. These case studies are available for you to read, that there is more success when you have strong and balanced systems, or secular systems that allow a person to heal, allow them to make mistakes, that remove the nature of guilt, like they're letting someone down, they're letting some impossible father figure down. When you remove these things and it's just the person, and the standard is secular, it's here on earth, where we understand things and we can objectively observe things, then that pressure non-existent. Their road to healing, while it may take time, it is not inherently stymied by a spiritual concept, because I don't think you could find a universal standard for spirituality amongst any person within this planet. Everyone's got a gradient of many people, not everyone, but many people have a gradient of how they believe in spirituality, whether it's 90-10 or 89 11, whatever it is. You're not going to be able to find a universal system that works. The secular system is a universal system that we can apply to anyone, because we don't invoke a religious creator, and we still enforce moral boundaries that conform to the societal standards. But that is more evidence for the subjective nature of it, because one society's standards for morality may be different than ours. Like what we hold here in America as the standard for morality is different than it is in, say, Iran or Afghanistan or Russia. That's their society. They have their moral standards.
JL, let me interject and ask a question, a clarifying question. Is it necessarily bad that religion has a structure or a moral structure? Is it necessarily bad?
I would argue that it's a very difficult question. From my perspective and from the evidence, I would argue that yes, because religious systems inherently they inherently control behavior before they impose moral systems. Well, is that it's controlling what people do, and then here's the moral reason to back up why you must not do these things. Okay, so when your system takes away free thought and stymies the desire to question and the desire to explore, when it stops these things and then it backs that up with a moral standard, with this zany abstract, then yes, it inherently does more harm.
Okay, so I'm going to pose you that same question. Do you think that a religious structure, a religious moral structure, is inherently bad?
Look, I'll tell this one thing, okay, that in the previous eras, okay, according to Indian history, I'm just trying to put an example over here. Okay, so there were two kinds of people in India. The one was Surya Vanshis and the other one was Chandra Vanshis. Okay, now both of them thought that the other way of living is completely bad, and but the point is both the styles were living were good, and they actually didn't live the life the way they lived actually. Like Surya Vanshis never lived the life like Chandra Vanshis, and Chandra Vanshis never lived the life like Surya Vanshis, and that's the reason they were arguing that this is not good, and this is not good, and this lifestyle is not adoptable. So in a similar way, I think JL, have you ever been on the religious front, or have you ever been uh, in the religious recovery group, or have you ever experienced that?
Yes, I was raised in confirmed Methodist before years before I deconverted.
Sorry?
I was raised in confirmed Methodist years before I deconverted. My deconversion was a slow process, and was a process of inquiry and education and experience, and basically when the more questions I asked, because it is in my nature to ask questions, the more questions I asked and the more logical conclusions I came to, that religion of any standard of in essence God is not a logical sound, is not a logical conclusion, it's not a logical an intellectually honest position to hold, and that anything that derives from that, just like I said in my intro, that any conclusions that you derive, especially abstract ideas like morality or justice or truth or anything of that, or any of these abstract ideas, anything that you draw, when you draw those from an irrational conclusion, like an irrational presupposition, like there is a God, you presuppose there is a God, or you believe there is a God. When you start from that position, from a logically unsound position or an irrational position, when you start there, everything that comes after that is going to be biased by that unsound what's that? I'm sorry, I lost the word. By that starting point. So when you start there,
presupposition.
So as a skeptic and as a secular humanist, we start from the most logically sound position we have, and that is we exist. We are here. We are a part of reality. We have to start from there. And we don't apply God to question. We don't apply the answer of God, the philosophical end result of questions that we asked when we didn't understand the planet that we lived on. We apply logical reasoning to that instead of presupposition, or instead of grasping at straws where we just grasp for the idea of God. We start from a secular position because that is what we have evidence of, and we start from there, and we see that. And still, with your argument being objective morality, you still have yet to explain the some 150,000 years that our species existed without religion, without any type of religious system.
I was going to come on that. Okay, so look, first of all, when I believe, or when we believe that God does exist, okay, that doesn't mean that it needs to be some soul from the outer world, okay. So what we believe as a God is someone who has, lived a life in such a way that, he inspires us to live the exact same way. That's what we tell God as, okay. Like in Hinduism, we tell, Lord Rudra is the Mahadev because he is the gods of the gods, because he has lived a life that way. In a similar way, there are many other gods, and there are in every kind of religion. So we believe them because they have lived a life which inspires us. Okay. In a similar way, if you see, when the human species were, there around way before, let's say, and obviously during those times there was one person who lived like a god, and that's why people actually praise to him, because he has done something unique which other people couldn't do. Now that's what we believe God is. So we don't believe God as some stole from the outer world. Okay, he is from our world, and we try to, we try to get inspiration from him. So it's quite obvious the origin of the religion, okay, has come from them, okay, and it's quite obvious because of that religion, because of those standards we have come across along the way, and we have actually done so many improvements in our logical thinking.
Well, Eddie, I hate to throw this out there. Well, it was a very, very poetic description of your approach to God and your belief in a God. Unfortunately, I think you kind of dodged the question, and that is, the question was how did we as a species survive without a moral construct derived from a God, from a religious structure, for 100 to 150,000 years. Some people think even some evolutionary biologists think even longer, but we know that these systems did not exist, and yet our species is still here. We are still here. We are still surviving, but we had to make it through almost 250,000 years with no religious structure whatsoever, with no religion, with no systems at all, with solely with behavioral rules that you don't come into my space, I don't come into your space, that I don't take your food, you don't take my food, because if you take my food, I can't feed my children, and then my children will die, and then the species is harmed. That these are basic behavioral routines, behavioral standards that even chimpanzees, orangutans, even orcas and great whales, they all understand these things, and they all participate in these kind of behavioral standards. So we came up as a species. We outlived our Neanderthal, our Naledi, our Erectus cousins, and we had these standards. And it wasn't until recent, in a kind of cosmological sense in the timeline, that religious systems became involved. How did we survive that 100,000 years or 150,000 years without these morals, without this morality, without this objective morality? Because it didn't exist. There is no evidence of its existence. But we still are here. We survived.
Okay.
Which means that
I think we need to back this up for a
are
second.
subjective.
I think we need to back this up for a second. I think we need to clearly define what morality is. Because hearing you speak on it, JL, it seems as if you are equating morality to a system of survival instincts. And I want to make sure that everybody kind of clarifies where their position on what the term means.
Well, morality, by definition, is a particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or society. That is what morality, by definition, is.
Okay. So Eddie, hang on a second.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Eddie, would you agree with that definition of morality?
I partially agree with that, because morality and daily routine has two different aspects, I'll say. Because morality are some high standards which we follow, like the way JL you were telling, like thousands of years ago we have survived till now. There is one more thing which I think you have missed, that people were killing each other to feed their family. Okay, rather than going on in a peaceful environment, they were actually killing each other. Now that is obviously not the morality which we are looking for right now. Then comes one person who actually sets the standard that this needs to be done and this not to be done, and this is how we need to live, and we need to increase our moral standards so that everyone in the world can live in peace. So that's where religion is born, and that's where the standards have came. Now, how can you say, or how can you actually how can you actually signify that a daily routine life, or you don't come into my premises, I don't go into your premises, you don't take my food, and I don't take your food, and if on the other stage, if I take, there will be killings and all. Now, the problem is that the religion and the morality which we are talking about right now is to helping each other out in whatever is the situation. So, how can you define morality in that?
Well, that's the whole thing. Is okay. So there are certain things that we accept. Okay, we know we accept that morality is not a universal constant. We accept that morality changes from society from society to society, as evidenced by the history by human history. We observe, and animals can demonstrate. Animals capable of higher reasoning can demonstrate human comparable morality, and we as humans have the most complex moral system of all social species on Earth. But because morality cannot be touched, because it can only be felt emotionally, this classifies morality as an abstract idea. It's in the same family of ideas that include truth, justice, liberty, innocence, guilt, and all the like. And being an abstract idea means that it is a subjective experience to each individual, and that we all agree upon as a society what the parameters of that morality is. And that's the subjective nature of it, because we all have our own individual concept of what is moral. And then we adapt and change that morality to the society that we currently live in. And this is an abstract idea that we applied, kind of like sticking a label on a jar. The jar held our behavioral systems for that enabled our species to survive, that enabled the well-being of our society. Okay, that was the jar, but the label we've placed on the jar is moral standard.
Well,
okay,
would you agree that there are, even though that there might be some minor differences, would you believe that, or would you agree that there are at least some basic moral constants amongst all society? That question is for both of you. So.
There are, and we can see that they're based upon behavioral standards that we have adopted as part of our social, as part of being social animals, because humans are social animals, and there are social constructs that exist within social animals. And so, in some social animals, like herds of bison, it's very, very rudimentary. It's very, very simple and basic, usually based on instinct. But on a reasoning, rational, or a species capable of the depth of rationality that we are, it becomes infinitely more complex. And it's still the root of it is in our behavioral standards for the well-being of our society. We have simply grown to the point where we can apply more systems to it. So when Eddy says that in those days, 100,000 years ago, people were killing people for food, people still kill people for food today. That behavior still exists. We have simply mitigated it through the adherence of subjective moral standards that we have applied to society.
True, but that's the reason why religion is there, right? At some point of time, they are the one who are stopping, and they are the one who are spreading this peace, right?
So ultimately, what you're saying is that could we have applied this moral standard could these moral standards that we have, don't kill and don't steal, these subjective moral standards, could we have applied them without a God? And absolutely, we could have applied them without a God. We did apply them.
That wasn't my God. Yes, we did apply it, but there was only one person, and that's how we believe that. Again, there is a difference. Okay, now GL, what you are trying to imply over here, that we are doing it without God, yes, but not without religion. Look, there is a difference between religion and God. Okay, religion is a kind of thing who believes God to those person who have actually lived a life in a way which inspires others. I'm telling this, okay, again. So what happens is that because we believe in him, because we believe that he is God, and that's the reason the whole religion is being set according to the standards which he has set. And it is religion who actually gives. Look, even if I tell you this thing, where from where the secular thoughts of morality comes from, it comes from, obviously not from the mind, but yeah, I mean sometimes from the mind, never to offend anyone.
it definitely comes from the mind because it's an abstract idea.
Yeah, exactly. So it does come from the mind, but who is actually going to explain that why are certain morals important to our life? That's the one which religion explains it, right?
Oh well, no. It's easily explained by the objective goals of the society. Well, but meaning the objectives of the society. So if your society take ancient Sparta for an example, ancient Sparta, their objective, their goal as a society was to create the most powerful fighting force, or the most powerful military on pretty much on Earth. That was the goal of their society, was to drive that. So one of the tools they utilized to help create that was a system of eugenics, and that is excluding weaker human beings from the bloodline, and enabling only what they deem to be the strong to survive. Now we view this as an immoral act, because they literally were just discarding babies. Okay, this was an actual practice, and the system of the Agoge is a horribly terrifying system that they utilized to ensure they got the strongest result out of any children that went into it. But these systems were for the Spartans, and we see the end result: one of the most terrifying fighting forces this planet has ever known, and whose tactics are still in use today. So there was a positive that came from that, despite what we would deem today as an immoral system. But their entire morality was based upon that ideal, the ideal of service to country.
All right, so we're going to do
that same ideal. So
we're going to take a quick break, musical break, let everybody kind of collect their thoughts, and then we will come back in about 10 minutes, and we'll continue this discussion. This is some really good stuff. You're on rockmetaltalk.com. This is a plot hole, and here are some tunes for you. I hope you like Eric Johnson.